Okay, thanks again, everyone, for being here with me on a Saturday morning. We're going to move into consistent messaging. And with consistent messaging, you can actually create opportunities. So let's talk about what that can look like. And I'll share a couple things that I do consistently and some interesting opportunities that have come out of them that I never thought. So I do post what I call a caregiving comfort on Mondays, and then there's a little podcast that goes with it. So I'm actually reading the comfort that I write. And I started doing it in 2003. And I have no idea why I thought of doing it in 2003. I wish I would have written it down so I could remember what made me think of doing it. And when I first started doing it, I actually was an email that I sent out to people. So people subscribed to receiving an email every Monday, and the email message was a caregiving comfort. And a caregiving comfort is a one-word title that inspires content about what it feels like to have that emotion or experience. And then I pivot in order to feel better about having that emotion or that experience. And I still post them on caringourway.com. And what's interesting is because I was committed to doing these every Monday, when I pivoted from doing them just as an email message and started posting them on my website, what happened was people started looking for them and then would post comments about it. And then I developed relationships with these family caregivers who were reading these messages, which helped me understand what messages they wanted to read. They inspired future content. And I got insights about what that experience is like. So they inspired additional content. When I put it out there, the content got better. That's the thing to keep in mind. The content that stays with us never has a chance to get better. It only gets better when we release it. Now, of course, that means you're taking a risk by releasing it, and the feedback you get will help that content get better. Then I also, my own self, felt relief about writing these messages. And so I used my own personal caregiving experience then to write about caregiving. These messages then became books. So remember when I was talking earlier about how you can start with a blog post and then turn it into a book? That's what I did with the weekly caregiving comforts. It was after I'd been writing them for about 5 years that I thought, wait a minute, I bet I could turn these into a book. And that's what I did. And then I was able to create 4 additional books based on new content. And it was because I kept posting them that I had enough to turn them into a book. If I had only posted 10 of these and stopped, they would have never been a book because there wasn't enough of them, which is why consistency is so important, and consistency based on a routine. Monday mornings, that's when I wrote the Caregiving Comforts. What's your consistent day to create content? I also picked something I could write that was not time consuming. I can write a comfort, record a podcast within an hour's period of time. That was the other thing that was critical for me. It could not be time intense. So think about something you can create that's a consistent message, that's not going to feel like, oh my gosh, this is taking me too much time. And then think about a piece of content that becomes a second piece of content. So Caregiving Comforts that I wrote became a podcast that I record. And then the Sunday question. We talked about that earlier today. So once I started writing these weekly questions, I thought, you know what, it would be interesting to turn this idea of asking good questions as a coping mechanism for stress and turn it into a workshop, which I did. And then I thought, gosh, that would be a great keynote, which it became. And then I thought, oh my gosh, that would be an interesting journal, an interesting book. So in December of every year so far, I've been able to release a new volume of the Sunday questions. So currently there's volume 1 and volume 2. And then in December, I'll release volume 3. Again, it's not time-consuming content for me. I typically spend about 30 minutes writing a Sunday question. We can look at content as something that can be easy for us to create when you get specific about the content you're creating. If it takes too much time, it's going to be difficult for us to actually create on a consistent basis. And again, I started writing the Sunday question as a newsletter in November of 2020. Wasn't sure what it would be, if I could keep doing it, what it could turn into. And then because I kept doing it, I could see what it could become. That's the other thing about consistent messaging. You start to have a greater vision for it the more you do it. People will give you feedback. Oh, I really enjoy these. Oh, okay, I should keep doing them. They help me. Oh, I should keep doing them. When I joined Twitter in 2009, I thought, this is fabulous. But how in the world am I going to develop my own voice on this platform? I could see that others I was connecting with had really interesting content they shared because of a particular voice they had. I thought, well, what's my voice on this platform? And at the time when I joined it, Twitter still had a character limit of 140. You had to write something within 140 characters. And I was actually working another job while I had my small business at this point. And so I would go to work really early so I could work on my business before I started my day job. And if I got to work really early, I was on time for my day job. If, for instance, I worked on my business before I left the house, I was late for my day job. So early to day job, work on my business, then I was on time for my day job. So because I was starting an early morning, I thought, well, what if I started posting good morning messages? I'm up early. What if that's the message I start to put out into the world through Twitter? What if that's my voice? So I committed to it. I posted good morning messages every day. And interestingly enough, a year and a half ago, a colleague that I kept in touch with over the years, sort of, reached out to me through Facebook because I also started posting the good morning messages on other platforms. And she says, oh, I love these messages that you post every day. They remind me of you. And so, you know what? I thought of you because we're hiring a speaker for a conference. I would have never thought a good morning message that I posted over, it's a different message every day, but these consistent good morning messages kept me top of mind with someone. And so when she needed to hire a speaker for a caregiving conference, she was able to think of me. And so I was able to present at her conference. That's the power of consistent messaging. I never promoted anything in my good morning messages other than a wish for you for a good day. But because I was sharing this every day, and because she looked for them, because she enjoyed them, I stayed top of mind. So the other thing that happened with this very same colleague is she hired me to speak at a conference, and then she hired me to write content for a workbook that her house of worship was putting together because she said, you know, I think of you all the time because of these good morning messages, and I like the way you write. How about writing for us? Okay, I said, absolutely. Again, it's a consistent message that keeps you top of mind. And you're not promoting yourself, you're demonstrating the value you bring to a community, like a platform, a social media platform. When I think about what effective messages do, I came up with a couple solutions, and I'd love for you to share some other opportunities you can think of that our consistent messages create for us. So for me, these consistent messages solved a problem. What's my voice on Twitter? What's my content that I share on my website or for family caregivers? What's the content I create that I don't see out into the space? And then again, the consistent messages keep you front and center. They also reflect your brand. We were talking a little bit about our niche and our spaces that we want to exist in. What my brand has become is this emotional support. And I provided emotional support through the caregiving comforts and the good morning messages. And so when someone was interested in someone who could talk about emotional support during a caregiving experience, they thought of me. There's no cost to receiving these. And they also are valuable for those who receive these. Yeah, I like that, Marilyn. Marilyn is sharing, keeps you on track. Yes. If your brand is around strategizing, you could think of a weekly message that you share that says, here's a common problem during a caregiving experience. Here's a strategy to consider as a solution. There is someone on LinkedIn that I follow who's very specific about helping family caregivers hire and manage a team. So it's hiring through a home care agency, for instance. And so he shares tips about what to do if there's a call off, what to do if there's someone that's not a good fit. How do you manage training so it doesn't feel so time consuming and exhausting? If you're looking for tips on how to manage your team that you hire through a home care agency, for instance, you'd go to him. And he's consistent about sharing those tips. You could start cultivating tips for family caregivers, and maybe that's something that you share on Tuesdays. Tuesday tip, and then maybe you start counting them. Tuesday tip number 11, Tuesday tip number 200. And then it could become a workbook. And the workbook is something that you give away for free as a lead generating activity. Okay, so what are you guys thinking about your consistent message? Yeah, let me know what you're thinking in the chat room. So you can share information, inspiration, something thought-provoking, something energizing. Okay, yeah, Ken is sharing hope and encouragement. Yes, because we know that it can be difficult to feel hopeful and encouraged during caregiving. And to receive messages of hope and encouragement is an invaluable experience. And then when we're looking to connect with someone who can keep us hopeful and encouraged, we're going to connect with Ken. That's the branding part of it. And Beth is sharing empowering tips for engaging with healthcare. Marla is sharing help to get through one day at a time. And Marilyn is sharing to know you are not alone. Yep, these are great. Oh my gosh, Corey is sharing hump day helpers. That's awesome. Ask the OT. That's awesome too. And maybe some others. What a great idea to do a Q&A too. And your Q&A could be questions that others have asked you over the years, and you could have a simple blog post that has the question, why do I want to use an OT? And then your answer. And you can post those Q&As every Wednesday. Well, not on Wednesdays because you have your hump day helpers, but maybe on Fridays, ask the OT. And when you start a Q&A, you can just be the one who comes up with the questions based on what people have asked you. And then you can encourage people to submit a question to you. And then you start to answer real life questions. It's okay to start with questions that you create on your own. All of you could do a Q&A column on your website, on social media, and your Q&A could be specific to your niche. Within your niche, what are the questions family caregivers ask? What's the information they need? What's the inspiration they want? What's the thoughtful message they hope to receive? What can you do that energizes them? I love the Q&A. Let's get a little more specific about creating that consistent message. So why are you doing it? My whys were I needed a voice on Twitter. I needed content for my website. Oh, Lauren, this is good too. Strategy and storytelling for career, life, and caregiving. Oh, wow. Awesome. Wow. I love the alliteration too. So be specific about your why because you want to make sure that what you're creating actually solves a problem. And it's solving your problem that then solves a family caregiver's problem. And then what platform do you use? It could be LinkedIn, it could be Instagram, it could be your own website, it could be a podcast. What's your delivery day? Is it the second Monday of every month? Is it the third Thursday? What's your delivery day? And then be specific about who's your audience. Who do you want to read or receive the message? What value are you delivering? And again, the value can be around information, inspiration, thoughtfulness. What was the other one? Or energizing someone. The consistent message could just be text. It could be just a graphic. It could just be an image. When I first started writing my good morning messages, it was all text. It's the same with my caregiving comforts because there wasn't options around public domain images way back then. So it was all text-based. Now I use a website called Pixabay. I'll put it in the chat room, which is an awesome resource for public domain images, which means you can use these images. So pixabay.com. So I find a photo of a coffee cup to go with my good morning messages, and I find another image to go with my weekly comforts. Oh, you know what else? And so now I also do 3 positives. So every day I keep track of the 3 positives and I encourage members of Caring Our Way to share their 3 positives. And I pick a photo from Pixabay that looks positive, and that's the image I use for that. Gosh, there's different ways you can do this. Yeah. So if you're looking for images, use Pixabay. And you probably all use Canva to create a graphic that you share on social media. And figure out a way to save your message easily so you don't have to do a lot of copying, pasting later. For my good morning message, I post it on Caring Our Way, on Blue Sky, which is the Twitter alternative, on Facebook, and on Substack. And I use Substack for my newsletter too, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. And then I copy it into a Word document. So I have all these good morning messages from years. And then when I'm ready to turn a good morning message into a journal, I just have my niece, my editor, copy, or actually she just duplicates that Word document and then creates the book from that duplicated Word document. So it's not copying and pasting. I use Substack for the two newsletters that I do every week, Sunday Question and Caregiving Reflections. And I use it because you can download a spreadsheet of all your newsletter issues. And that's really helpful for the Sunday question because I download a spreadsheet and then that becomes the book. I'm trying to think of an easier way to do this for the weekly comforts. I post them on Caring Our Way, and there's no way to download that content. So my niece has to go through and copy and paste. So I have to think of a better system. I figured out the system for the good morning messages and for the Sunday question. Just thinking through the weekly comforts. But have a way that you are saving the content so you can use it in different forms. So it's easy then when the next form is ready. When you're ready to publish your book, you just, for instance, duplicate a Word document. You just download a spreadsheet. And then consider what else it could become. The workshop, the keynote. If you have Tuesday tips for family caregivers and you've come up with 100, your keynote could be the best 10 tips of 100 tips for family caregivers. And then your keynote is those 10 best tips or the 10 most popular tips that family caregivers voted for. You can see where it's going. And it could be a workshop that's like a breakout session for a conference. And then you could think about, well, how do I transform it into a keynote? So it's more than just a workshop, but it's a keynote. And a keynote typically is something where the audience is changed because of your message. A workshop is someone learns from you because they've been in the workshop, but the keynote is someone is changed because of what you shared. Okay. I'm curious what other ideas you have for your consistent message. And again, it's most important you are consistent about sharing the message. And here's the other piece that's really important. I shared outcomes that happened as a result of sharing these messages, but I did not put pressure on myself for these outcomes to happen. I just stayed committed to creating content that I felt good about. That was the outcome. I wanted content that I liked. And then the outcome that I didn't expect was, for instance, being hired to write, being hired to do a series of workshops at a conference. The outcome you're looking for is that you like the content you're creating. That's the outcome. And then other things that happen are just icing on the cake. It's most important. You're creating content that you like. So Tony is asking, are you recommending a daily message or do you think a weekly message works as well? So I gave you examples of a daily message, which is good morning, and a weekly message, which is caregiving comforts. However, it doesn't matter how often, it only matters that you commit to the delivery day, whatever that delivery day is, the second Tuesday, it's once a month. Every Tuesday morning, it's every week. It just has to be consistent. You determine what the schedule is. Okay, and Lauren, yes, absolutely. So Lauren is sharing when my content felt aligned, it was so much easier to put it out there. Exactly. When you like the content, you've created a really positive outcome. It matters most, you like it. And here's the other piece about it. When you like it, you are successful. If you put it out there waiting for others to approve of it, it is a terrible wait to get someone else to approve it. Because I had bloggers on my website that I used to own for many years, I could see what happened when someone blogged in hope, with hoping someone would approve of it. It was Jane, that was her name. She cared for her daughter. And so she blogged about caring for her daughter. And she talked about the stress of blogging. And I thought, this is interesting. What's stressful for you, Jane? I asked her. And she said, well, I push publish, and then I wait for a comment. And she says, the waiting for a comment is awful. And I thought, oh, she is believing that someone else has to give her approval for what she's just written, rather than realizing she gives herself approval. I like this. That's all I need to know. I like this. If you are constantly waiting for positive feedback, it is too stressful. And then it becomes you trying to get positive feedback from others, and you lose the authenticity of your message. Write what you like, create what you like, then you're successful. If you get caught in that game of waiting for someone to say, I loved this, it is a terrible wait. Okay, there we go, your consistent message.